At the edge of his land, there was a ravine no one wanted. Too steep to farm, too rocky to use, just empty space. So when the neighbors needed somewhere to dump their broken equipment, they used his old engines, bent frames, rusted parts that weren't worth fixing. They'd back up their trucks, tip the load, and laugh as it disappeared into the drop. Nothing but junk down there. For years, that's all it was. A graveyard of things no one needed anymore. Until one summer, everything started breaking, and the same people who dumped it came back looking for it. His name was Caleb Rourke, 52 years old, quiet, kept to himself. The kind of man people nodded to, but didn't really know. The land he worked wasn't the best. Rocky in places, uneven, and that ravine cut straight through the back of it. Most people saw it as wasted ground, something you worked around, something you ignored. Caleb saw it differently. Not useful, but not useless either. So when the first neighbor asked if he could dump some scrap down there, Caleb didn't argue, just shrugged. Go ahead. One truck turned into 2, then 5. Then it became a habit. If something broke and wasn't worth fixing, it ended up in his ravine. Engines with seized parts, frames twisted beyond repair, old pumps, worn-out gearboxes. Anything too expensive to deal with was easier to get rid of. And Caleb never stopped them. He didn't organize it, didn't charge for it, didn't even talk about it. He just let it happen from the road. It didn't look right. A growing pile of scrap disappearing into a place no one checked twice. Neighbors noticed. They always do. Why you letting them dump all that on your land? You're turning that place into a junkyard. Gonna regret that one day. Caleb would just nod. Go back to what he was doing. Because to him, it wasn't a junkyard. Not really. It was just things that still had something left, even if no one else could see it. And over time, the pile grew deeper, heavier, layer by layer, of things people had already given up on. While everything else around him kept moving forward, Caleb was quietly surrounded by everything that had been left behind. For a long time, nothing seemed wrong. The ranches around him kept running. Machines handled everything. Tractors did the heavy work. Pumps kept the water moving. Engines replaced effort. And as long as they worked, everything else stayed easy. If something broke, it wasn't a problem. You replaced it, ordered a new part, called someone to fix it, or just upgraded to something better. That was the system. Fast, reliable, replaceable. And Caleb? He stayed exactly the same. Working slower, fixing things when he could, leaving them when he couldn't. While everyone else moved forward, he was surrounded by what they left behind. Year after year, the ravine filled up. Layer after layer of parts no one needed anymore. Some of them barely used. Some of them worn down. Some of them broken in ways that didn't seem worth the time. But Caleb never saw them the way others did. He noticed things, the way certain engines failed, the parts that still worked, the pieces that could be taken apart and used somewhere else. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to matter. Still, to everyone else, it didn't make sense. You're holding on to trash. You'll never use any of that. Should have cleared that out years ago. Caleb never disagreed. He just kept going, because as long as everything else was working, he didn't need to prove anything, and neither did they. But over time, something else started to change. Not in the ravine, not on his land, but in the way Everything else depended on something. That couldn't always be replaced. At first, it was small. A delay on parts. A repair that took longer than expected. Nothing serious, just inconvenient. Then it started happening more often. Orders taking weeks instead of days. Parts becoming harder to find. Costs going up. Machines sitting idle longer than they should. Still, no one thought much of it, because it always came through in the end. It always got fixed. Until one season, it didn't. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. One machine went down, then another. At first, it was just inconvenience. A tractor waiting on a part. A pump that needed repair. Nothing urgent. Nothing serious. Except this time, the parts didn't come. Orders were delayed, then delayed again. Weeks turned into months. Suppliers ran out. Warehouses emptied, and the same answer kept coming back. Out of stock. At first, people worked around it, borrowed equipment, shared what they had, made temporary fixes. But the breakdowns didn't stop. They spread. More machines went down. More systems failed. And the work kept piling up. Fields needed to be cleared. Water needed to be moved. Equipment needed to run. But nothing was getting fixed. Not properly. Not in time. Because everything depended on something that wasn't available anymore. And for the first time, replacing it wasn't an option. That's when people started thinking differently. Not about upgrading, not about buying new, but about fixing what they already had. Even if it was old, even if it was broken, even if it had been sitting unused for years. The problem was, they didn't have the parts. They had thrown them away, piece by piece, load by load, without thinking twice. And now, they needed them back. That's when someone mentioned it, quietly, like it wasn't something they wanted to admit. You know, Caleb's got a whole ravine full of that stuff. At first, no one said anything, because everyone knew. They all had a part in it. They had all dumped something down there, laughed while doing it, turned away without looking back. But now, there was nowhere else to look. And slowly, one by one, they started heading back toward his land, toward the place they had spent years filling, with everything they thought they'd never need again. The first man didn't bring a truck, just tools, and a list. He walked up to Caleb's place early in the morning, not saying much, just nodding toward the back of the land. Mind if I take a look down there? Caleb studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Go ahead. The man made his way down into the ravine, careful, slow, like he wasn't sure what he'd find. For years, no one had gone down there. They had only thrown things in, forgotten about them the moment they hit the bottom. But now, he was looking, really looking, turning over parts, wiping dirt off metal, trying to recognize pieces he hadn't thought about in years. It didn't take long. A bracket, still intact. An engine housing, cracked, but usable. A gear assembly that just needed cleaning. Not perfect, not new, but enough. By the time he came back up, he wasn't empty-handed, and he wasn't the only one anymore. By the next day, another man showed up. Then two more. Then a truck. Then a line. Not of machines this time, but of people. Walking down into that ravine with tools, ropes, and whatever they could carry. The same place they had laughed at, now filled with voices, work, movement. Because down there, what used to be junk had turned into something else. Options. One by one, they started pulling things out, cleaning them, fitting them together, making something work out of what had been left behind. And Caleb? He didn't take charge, didn't organize, didn't tell anyone what to do. He just stood nearby, watching, stepping in when someone needed help, pointing out parts they might have missed, the things he had noticed, when no one else was paying attention. And slowly, the machines started coming back. Not all at once. Not perfectly, but enough. A tractor running again. A pump pulling water. Systems moving. Even if they weren't new. Even if they weren't fast. Because now, it wasn't about perfect. It was about working. And standing there, looking down into that ravine filled with motion. There was only one thing left to understand. Nothing down there had ever been useless. It had just been waiting. By the end of that season, things were running again. Not the way they used to. Not as fast, not as smooth. But they worked. Fields were cleared. Water was moving. Machines that had been silent for months were back in motion, piece by piece, part by part, built from what had once been thrown away. The ravine didn't look the same anymore. Not empty, not cleaned out, just different. Where there had been piles of forgotten scrap, there were now gaps, spaces where something had been taken back, put to use again. People didn't laugh anymore. They didn't make comments from the roadside. They didn't shake their heads, because they had been there. Climbed down into that ravine, dug through what they once called junk, and carried something back up. That mattered. Caleb never changed the way he worked. He didn't turn it into a business, didn't charge for access, didn't remind anyone of what they had said before. He just kept doing what he always had, paying attention, fixing what could be fixed, holding on to what others didn't see value in. Because to him, it had never been about saving everything. It was about understanding it, knowing what still had something left, and knowing when it would matter. Years later, people still passed by that land, still glanced toward the ravine, but not the same way, because now they didn't see a place where things were thrown away. They saw a place where things waited, waiting to be used, waiting to matter, waiting for the moment when nothing else worked, and what was left behind was all that remained.